Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm happy to present the new numbers to you all in Alaska. It's a lunch and learn for you folks. It's a pre-dinner lunch and learn for me. But nonetheless, I'm happy you are all interested in the new data that we have on Alaska. And I'll start off with a update of what we've come up with this year. What are the new data that we have for this year? We have new data for the calendar year 2021. We also went back and revised the data for the years 2017 to 2020, incorporating any new or improved data sources that we have. And the update to the outdoor recreation satellite account follows the annual update of the integrated national accounts, the industry and national accounts. So we've brought in all of the new data that we have at the national level for household spending, which is what the outdoor recreation satellite accounts are based off of. All of this data is is a subset of the household spending numbers we've published in the national accounts, and then we take a a piece of that and identify what is the spending that's related to outdoor recreation. So that was updated in September, and now in November, we created the outdoor recreation satellite account with those new data. At the US level, the outdoor recreation satellite account was 454 billion. That's 1.9% of the US economy. That's down from our 2017 to 2019 level of 2.2%, but it's an increase from the pandemic 2020 percentage that was 1.7%. We have 4.5 million jobs in the United States associated with outdoor recreation. That's 3%. And we have 224 billion in wage and salary compensation related to outdoor recreation. That's 1.8% of the U.S. When we look at how those numbers are in the state of Alaska, in Alaska we have $2.1 billion in value added, which is a profit type measure that we use, and it's the same as GDP. And in Alaska, it was a higher share than the U.S., where the U.S. was 1.9%. We have in Alaska 3.6% of the state economy is related to outdoor recreation. We had 18, almost 19,000 jobs related to outdoor recreation, being 5.6% of state jobs, and 1.1 billion in compensation. Self-employed people are not in these jobs and compensation numbers since they work for themselves. These are wage and salary jobs and wage and salary compensation. So if you're looking at our numbers for jobs and compensation, and you're looking at a sector that tends to have a lot of self-employed people like fly fishing guides, they're going to be included in our value added number, but not in our jobs and compensation numbers. As a kickoff to looking at some of the geographic data, I wanted to remind everybody that the way we're measuring outdoor recreation is by place of production, not the residence of the consumer. So when we're talking about something like a service, like our fly fishing guide who's being paid to provide a service, the service and the location where that um, service is produced are the same thing. The guide is producing the service as he or she is teaching me how to fish. But for things like physical goods like boats or RVs or clothing, we're going to show the value of production, so the wholesale price where that product is produced. So in the case of a lot of clothing, that's going to be overseas. In the case of um, products like boats, we might show them in a factory in Tennessee or in Florida, and then that boat is then shipped up to Alaska. So the wholesale price of that boat shows up at the factory where the factory is located. What we will show for Alaska is the retailer's markup on that boat and any services that are needed to operate and maintain that boat. That's going to be in Alaska. So the marina where I store my boat is going to be in Alaska. A repair that is made to my boat is going to be in Alaska. So we're going to show those services related to boating in the boating activity for Alaska, but the production is where that product is produced. Now, as a reminder for what things looked like in 2020, we had across the board declines and quite strong declines. I think one of the more interesting things for this was how broad-based the declines in 2020 were, where there weren't really some states that were growing and some states that were declining. Everybody declined. And we can see here the darker colored orange states are the states that decreased less during the pandemic. And this is a change in employment from 2019 to 2020. And then we saw the largest decline in Hawaii, where people weren't able to travel to Hawaii to go to the beach or to go hiking or to enjoy any of the outdoor recreation that's available in Hawaii. Alaska was also quite strongly impacted by the decline during the pandemic, where we had a 19% decline in outdoor recreation employment in 2020. But the states in the middle of the country, the sort of Midwestern states there in the Great Plains states, had some manufacturing that helped them to decline a little bit less than some of the states that were more heavily dependent on the tourism piece, such as New England or Florida or the Western states. Just as I said in 2020, everybody declined. In 2021, as we're seeing the bounce back and people are traveling again, we're seeing all the states growing again for their outdoor recreation and employment. We had our strongest growth, our highest growth rate in outdoor recreation employment in Hawaii, and that growth rate was 23.4%. Alaska also had a strong growth rate in the top quintile of 18.4%. That's the third fastest growing state after Hawaii and after Rhode Island, 19.3%. And also Wyoming had Alaska and Wyoming were tied at number 3 there with 18.4% growth rates. Looking at the jobs share of state wage and salary jobs, so sort of the proportion of a state's jobs related to outdoor recreation, we can see that Hawaii was the top state again, where 7.1% of jobs in Hawaii in 2021 were related to outdoor recreation. Alaska again is in the top quintile along with Hawaii at 5.6% of jobs in Alaska being related to outdoor recreation. We also had the Mountain West states that were in that top quintile, New England and Florida, where we had a lot of outdoor recreation activity going on with not only beaches and boating and fishing, but also amusement parks, which are located in Florida. So that sort of gives you a sense of the geographic range across states as we start drilling down further and further and looking at more specifically on what's going on in Alaska. Oh, I have one more slide here. This is the growth rate in outdoor recreation value added, which is our profits type measure. If any of you would like me to go into and explain, what value added is or what one of our terms is, please put that in the chat and I'll be, that way I'll know if something I'm talking about isn't clear to people. But this is our growth in outdoor recreation value added from 2020 to 2021 as we're coming out of the pandemic. Similar to what I was saying earlier, we have the top growth in Hawaii, strong growth in Alaska, and then in our mountain states where people were not traveling to but are starting to come back to in those blue and teal looking states that we have in the Mountain West. Looking at the um, results for how Alaska compared to the U.S. and how Alaska's overall economy compared to its outdoor recreation related economy. We can see here in the chart that for value added, Alaska had nearly 35% growth. It had a strongly growing, a more strongly growing economy than the U.S. as a whole at this about 17%, this pale blue bar that was Alaska's overall economy. For the U.S. as a whole, the outdoor recreation economy grew at just below 25%, which was faster than the overall U.S. economy that was here at about 12%, 11%, 10. Um, and when we look at compensation and employment, we see similar stories where outdoor recreation, the orange bar, grew faster than the U.S. economy as a whole, the yellow bar, and that Alaska's outdoor recreation economy grew faster than the U.S. aggregate total outdoor recreation economy. We did have compensation in Alaska overall growing a little bit less quickly than the compensation in the United States. So comparing the pale blue bar to the yellow bar. So looking at we just saw that we had this at the U.S. level. We had this 25% growth rate and this 35% growth rate for value added for Alaska and for the U.S. So we're next going to look at what's the driver of these changes. And so here I have this total growth rate in the U.S. about 25%, and this growth rate here in the dark blue bar for Alaska at 35%. And if I look at the United States, the biggest driver to the biggest contributor to that 25% growth rate is this 10 percentage point contribution in the yellow bar, the gold colored um, industry, which is our arts, entertainment, recreation, accommodations, and food service sector. So that's all of our travel and tourism industries, the hotels and the restaurants, things that support you when you go on vacation. And when we look at the uh, Alaska growth, we see that we had about a 10 percentage point contribution to the Alaska's 35% growth rate from that arts, entertainment, recreation, accommodations, and food sector. But we also had a stronger contribution where we're looking at about 17 percentage points contributing from the transportation and warehousing sector. And in Alaska, that sector includes the cruise ship industry, which is quite a big industry for people in Alaska, where we have a lot of cruise ships that go up the coast of Alaska and bring people up to places like Glacier National Park, and then let people off for day excursions in the state. And so we see a large contribution from that transportation and warehousing sector that contains cruise ships. When we look at the next state to the right, Hawaii, which was our fastest growing state, we can see that in Hawaii, we didn't have that big cruise ship component. We did have a strong transportation and warehousing contribution because of airfare, just as we did in Alaska. You have to generally fly to Alaska or fly to Hawaii. But in Hawaii, we had a larger contribution from that hotel and restaurant sector than we did in the Alaska numbers. Wisconsin is the fourth state that I've shown here, and Wisconsin is the slowest growing state. Still grew, but it is our slowest growing state in the United States. And we can see that there was not as large a contribution from that transportation and warehousing sector, and we also had a more modest contribution from the arts entertainment, the travel and tourism sector.
Hey, Stash, before you go
Yes.
on, there is a question. Why don't we just get some baseline and maybe like a layman's definition or an easy definition of exactly what does value added mean? Like if I'm telling like an elected official that there's this value added growth, what does that mean? What exactly am I,
Sure.
how do I
So
describe that to them?
value added is equivalent to GDP. When we publish GDP numbers every month, that's another word for GDP. And the easiest way to define what value added or GDP is, it's a gross profits type number. If I had a store that sold, if I sold flowers, if were a florist, my value added would be my profits or my sales less the cost of my materials, except for my payroll expenses. So the if I had sales of $10 of flowers and the flowers cost me $5, I would subtract the uh, $5 from $10. I have $5 left over. I would subtract another dollar for all of my overhead and materials, the boxes and ribbons that I need to package the flowers. So I'm left with $4, and that $4 is my value added um, number. That's what I'm left with after I pay for my supplies and my overhead, and that's our gross profits. From that, I need to pay myself. I need to pay any loans or any debt that I need to, any interest payments that I might have, and then I will need to uh, pay any employees from that.
Thanks, Stash. And that's a pretty good analogy in flowers. What might it mean in outdoor recreation activity?
So for outdoor recreation, if you're a guide, it's going to be your expenses for fuel or anything else that you need to to operate your business, and it's going to be the amount that you pay yourself, either directly or sort of as leftovers, is going to be the value added component. If you're looking at something like a hotel, the value added is going to be the sales of your hotel less the amount that you spend for water and electricity in those little tiny soap containers. And it's going to be the amount that you need to have left over to pay for your payroll and yourself.
Okay, thanks a lot. That really helps.
So this was as I said, these are the contributions of what's driving the growth in our different states. We could see in Alaska the growth was driven by transportation and warehousing. In Hawaii, it was arts, entertainment, um, the travel and tourism pieces, and in Wisconsin, it was also driven by the arts and entertainment. And at the U.S. as a whole, it was arts and entertainment as the big driver. Alaska was a little bit unusual with that large travel and that transportation and warehousing piece. Looking at the biggest industries, what industries are the biggest share of outdoor recreation in Alaska in 2020 and in 2021? We can see that Transportation and warehousing, that blue piece of the pie has grown from 26% to 34%. So that's the resumption of people flying into the state, so travel services from air transportation, and also the water transportation piece, which is in here where the cruise ships are located. We also have a about the same amount for arts and entertainment. It's not that it's necessarily smaller here. We just see that the relative share has gone down by 1 percentage point because the um, transportation and warehousing is growing. So we're having this um, sort of relative shrinking of the importance of the other states. But the main story here is that we went from transportation being 26% of the outdoor recreation value added in Alaska last year, and it's now grown to 34%. We also have the government sector being pretty significant in Alaska, as there's a lot of public lands in Alaska, and the government also, when we look at government for uh, outdoor recreation, we're also measuring all of the government services that are used to maintain local parks and municipal golf courses, all of the really local outdoor recreation facilities that we have in the state, even if they're not necessarily tourist focused, the state and local governments need to maintain those. So now that we're looking, we sort of pivoting now, and not we're going to look at the outdoor recreation activities. The last few slides we were always talking about industries and industry sectors. So the transportation sector or the manufacturing sector that we're seeing in those previous slides. Now we're looking at the same activity but categorized by types of activities. And we have three broad super sectors of activities. And those are supporting activities in blue. Supporting activities are mostly travel and tourism industries. It's going to be the hotels, the restaurants. It matches pretty closely with what we were seeing in that arts, entertainment, recreation, accommodations, and food service. Is the supporting activities match pretty well with that. Conventional activities for outdoor recreation are the the very traditional outdoor recreation activities of hiking, camping, hunting, shooting, snow sports, as well as RVs and boating and kayaking and canoeing, all of those sort of physically rigorous outdoor activities. The other outdoor recreation activities, the dark gray bar, are going to be activities that are outdoor activities, but a little bit less physically rigorous than the um, conventional activities. So that includes things like outdoor festivals and concerts, outdoor amusement parks, golf courses, and outdoor tennis courts, as well as just general outdoor recreation like gardening. And what we're seeing here, the main story for what we saw from 2019 to 2020, capturing the pandemic in 2019 to 2021, capturing the pandemic in 2020, is this big decline in the supporting activities. At the United States level on the left, we see that the the big change there was that uh, decreased to about $150 billion in supporting activities in 2020, as people just didn't travel. So if there was travel, people stayed close to home, or they used things like RV parks instead of hotels, and or hotels were still operating, but they were only filling every other room, or really spreading people apart. So we saw this contraction in that supporting activity. The conventional activities in orange were were growing as people were buying more uh, outdoor recreation equipment like boats and RVs. So we saw that conventional piece, which includes the domestic manufacturing of those things, growing. And we saw other activities falling a little bit, but not nearly as much as the supporting activities. Alaska, because of its dependence on tourism and travel for outdoor recreation, saw a pretty steep decline there in blue supporting, where we went from about $1.7 billion in 2019 down to about $1 billion in 2020 for supporting activities, and then a rebound to about $1.5 billion in 2021. The um, conventional piece in Alaska stayed pretty constant over those 3 years. We didn't see the values in Alaska being as high. Alaska, along with a state like Hawaii, doesn't have as much manufacturing of things like boats and RVs and snowmobiles and the big dollar value outdoor recreation equipment that we saw in some other states in the United States. So I mentioned Hawaii is sort of similar to Alaska in that it's a relatively small state that is very dependent on outdoor recreation, travel and tourism visitor spending. And so we can see somewhat similar patterns here for Alaska and in Hawaii. The relatively large share of the state economy, outdoor recreation economy, that is represented by that supporting outdoor recreation, which is the arts, entertainment, accommodations, food services piece, and relatively small shares that are in that conventional and other outdoor recreation. And as a reminder, the for things like boats or RVs, they're purchased and used in Alaska, but a large piece of that expense is going to the manufacturer, and so we're going to show that where that product was manufactured. We're nearing the end, so I thought I'd stop and see if there were any other questions in our chat here.
No, we're good so far, Stash. You can keep
Okay.
rolling. Yeah.
This slide, and I don't necessarily expect everybody to digest this fully. I took some selected numbers from our website and converted them to shares of the state's total outdoor recreation economy number to uh, see how different states compared, and that's always interesting to see how Alaska compares to other states that are similar or maybe not so similar. And then I have the U.S. values and shares. When we're comparing states that are very different in size, especially or to the United States, where we have outdoor recreation in Alaska in 2021 being just over $2 billion in the top left here. It's very hard to say, well, how does that compare? Saying, well, it's only a very small fraction of the U.S. $454 billion. But what we want to see is where is Alaska strong? Where is it maybe have a larger share of its economy related to outdoor recreation than the U.S. So I was taking some numbers here and looking at the boating and fishing um, activity. And the boating and fishing activity is going to be not only the boat, but the maintenance, the fuel, the storage, all the things that you need to operate your boat is in the boating fishing activity. And here we can see that Maine, with a lot of coastline and close to population centers, has 14, uh, 14.6% of its outdoor recreation economy in the boating and fishing sector. In Alaska, it is 4.5%. But when we look at the um, travel and tourism uh, activity, which is all of the hotels and things that are needed for any sort of outdoor recreation in the state. Alaska, uh, almost 54% of Alaska's outdoor recreation economy is in that travel and tourism sector. That's larger than the U.S. share of 31.2% and larger than the just below 40% in Maine. Hawaii is similar. It's a little bit higher, but it's a similar profile to Alaska, where in Hawaii it was 60.7% of their outdoor recreation economy that was in the travel and tourism sector. I was saying that government expenditures as an act, under the activity side, so government expenditures supporting activities, facilities are going to be 6.7% of Alaska's outdoor recreation economy, which is close to what we saw in Washington state and higher than the US average of 5.7%. Talking about RVing is, where RVs are produced and where they're used. And so we can see that Hawaii, which is a tough place to get your RV, a tough place to get your RV out of, has a very small share of their uh, outdoor recreation economy that is related to RVing. It's 0.6%. It's much higher in places like Maine, where people can drive their RVs to and stay in campgrounds, RV campgrounds in the state, and also for in Alaska, it's 4.6%, because Alaska is also a place that people can drive an RV to and spend their summers living in an RV or traveling around in an RV. So this gives us a little bit of a sense of how we can drill down into the numbers. Uh, I wanted to take well, let me finish the slide deck first. One of the things that you can download from our website are these handy 2-page state summary sheets that give the value, the top line numbers of value added, which is gross domestic product, employment and compensation, the value for the state and the share of the state's economy. So here it's, I was saying earlier that employment in Alaska, it's 18.9 thousand jobs, 5.6% of the state economy. And then we have listings of what the top activities are in the state and the state rank, whether that the state is 23rd for recreational flying, but it is 42nd in rank for RVing. So it gives you a sense of where you are in the pecking order for these activities. The second page has a timeline of value added employment and compensation and the U.S. percentage. So over the open period that we have from 17 to 21, so you can see how the state's values grew, and we can see in 2020 the impact of the pandemic. There's also at the bottom of this second page some definitions if you don't remember what I was saying about what our definitions are for value added or employment or compensation. They are defined on that state summary sheet. And I will provide this slide deck to you. I'll PDF it up so that I can mail it out to you. And it has the main inbox that we monitor for questions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to send us an email. That might be the most convenient way of contacting me because of the time zone difference. But if otherwise, my phone number there is at the bottom.
Hey,
And
Stash, we do have a few questions.
sure.
I'd like to see if you can field for us. One is the link to the state summary sheets, can you put that in the chat box by any chance? So folks can get that, or is
Yes.
it somewhere?
Well, I'll do that, but I'll also, you should be able to see my web browser, I think, right?
Kind of. Not
I see
really.
a white Google
Yep. Mhm.
screen. Okay.
Yep.
So the easiest way is to have Google take you to our data. I find that's just the easiest way. If you search on BEA, which is Bureau of Economic Analysis, and ORSA, ORSA, and hit enter, the first result is going to be us. That's going to be the outdoor recreation homepage at the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So you're going to go there and you see the current news release, and the state summary sheets are going to be right down here in the what we call drawer, this sub menu that says state data. And then I can go down here and I can select Alaska, or browse on a map and select Alaska, and it's going to pull up that state summary sheet that I was talking about. So it has the top, the headline numbers, the top activities, the composition by supersector of the economy in Alaska, and then our graph over time and the definitions at the bottom. So I will put that in there where we have that data saved. I will also say that we have a really, I think, easy to use set of interactive state tables. So I'm back here at this home page that Google took me to. If I want to look at the release, I can download the press release that has sort of an introduction, some headline information about outdoor recreation. That's something that's worth looking at. But what I really want to let people look at is this link that we have here for interactive state tables. It takes you right to all of the data that we produce. And I did make a note to myself that one of the nice things about this data that we produce for outdoor recreation is that it is fully consistent with the data that we have for the rest of the economy. So when I was talking about the transportation and warehousing sector, those are industry definitions that you're going to find repeated through all of the data that we have at the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So if you're kind of compare Alaska to a different state, or Alaska to the outdoor recreation piece of an industry to the industry as a whole, you can find all of that information on our website. So when we were talking about employment or compensation, if you look at our data for employment and income by county and metropolitan area, we're going to have the same industry definitions, and you can look up compensation and wage and salary employment. But going back to the satellite account here under Arts and Culture and Outdoor Recreation, I click on that, and I can go down here and look at outdoor recreation employment. And then I can select one or more states. I can select all the states. I can select Alabama or Alaska, or if I hold the control key, select Alabama and Alaska. I can select any of the industries that I was talking about here, or I can say all of them, which I'm going to do. I'm going to say show me all of them, and I can choose levels or growth rates, levels being the values. And then it'll ask me what years I'm interested in. And here I'm going to say, well, I just want to look at the 2020 and 2021 years. And it pulls up the data for me. And if I'd like to create a table, I can download a table, an Excel table, or create a chart of the data that I have here. And so it's really useful to let me pull just the states I was interested in. Just like earlier, I was looking at Alaska and Hawaii and Maine and the United States. I can find that data here. The one thing that we don't have in the downloadables, we don't have the U.S. values loaded in here. It's just the states. We don't have the total U.S. in here. So you'd have to add up the pieces. But this is a really useful tool for pulling out data or subsets of the data.
Hey, Stash, another
Mhm.
question we had was, I know last year when we were talking, you were talking about refining the data down to smaller geographic areas than just an entire state. So people are asking, like, can we go through this data and find numbers by a particular region of Alaska, or is it just at this point the data is just statewide?
Unfortunately, at this point, we only have state level data. We have a lot of requests for sub-state level data, but it's something we're still investigating and working on and seeing what resources we can bring to that.
And a similar question, but different, is wondering whether there's a way to distinguish between outdoor recreation spending activity generated by in-state residents versus those out-of-state travelers.
We have some data that we use for allocating out of state data, but we're not able to publish it yet. So in-state and out of state are together. There are some places where you would expect the numbers to be more out of state. So the hotel and restaurant pieces. So this is Alabama that we have here, but on the industry side we have, well, Alaska. We have the accommodations and food services industry here. The value for accommodations and food service. This is the employment numbers. We expect that accommodations and food services are going to be more likely to be out of state visitors than in state visitors. We do also have an activity that we call local trips and travel that we do break out under the activity side, where that's going to be spending primarily fuel, but also some other things on local trips to things like a local park or going locally for a hike somewhere within 50 miles that you're not expecting to have a lot of hotel and travel expenses. Uh, but we don't have an explicit way of breaking out the local and the non-local piece.
And how about within some of the winter sports? Do you have data specific to something like, lots of Alaskans snowmobile, or we call it snow machining? Do you have, is there any specific data for that sector, snowmobiling or snow machining?
We do have that implicitly broken out. If I go back to my slides here, no, maybe it's not in this slide. If I go to here we go. So here is the data that we have. This is a spreadsheet of all the data that we have. We have a an activity that is called other snow activities, including snowmobiling or snow machining, which is the primarily going to be the snowmobiling piece. If you look at the footnote in our published tables, that other category includes dog mushing, sleighing, snowmobiling, snowshoeing, and some other snow tubing. But the big piece of that is going to be the snow machining once we've taken out the skiing and the snowboarding. So we will see that in Alaska, the uh, this is the value added number. The activity that was snow activities, including snowmobiling, was $12.3 billion in 2021, uh, slight decrease from an 8% decrease from the $13.4 billion that it was in 2020. So
Okay.
people were using their snowmobiles less in 2021 because this activity includes all of the uh, things that you need to operate it. So the fuel, the maintenance, the transportation. Um, but the snowmobile itself was probably made someplace like um, Michigan.
Right. And I think one of the things that I think of anecdotally is that there was also supply chain issues, right? So there was snow machine sales sold out like early in the pandemic, and so there were no snow machines to buy. But people were still obviously using them.
So yeah, it looks like we had more use of them as people were trying to do things outdoors that they couldn't travel, and they were um, doing things outdoors more than they would otherwise. We also saw a decline in boating, and other boating is where we have power boats. When we have our boating fishing category, and once we take out canoeing and um, once we take out the canoeing and the fishing and the sailing, and we're left with this other boating category, which is really going to be our power boats. And we saw a
Okay.
decline in that. And we didn't see that decline in the durable goods manufacturing industry. So we really didn't see the the manufacturing component decline, but we did see the activity decline, and that was um, a a decline in participation in those services that you need to keep your boat up and running.
Okay. And then another question, a really great one comes from, it says, a lot of outdoor recreation goes for much smaller, um, than vehicles and boats, outdoor gear like clothing, shoes, backpacks, dry bags, tents, etc. Um, in the data, is there a place to find where some of these essential supplies like rods and reels and fishing and bikes and skis,
That that's a that's
are
a very
represented?
That's a very good question. If it's something like a ski boot or a fishing rod where it's really only usable for one activity, it's going to show up in that activity. So in the fishing activity, we're going to have the um, the equipment that is necessary for fishing and really is only used for fishing. So the rods, the waders, the fishing vests. Likewise, for skiing, we're going to see the ski boots and the skis and the poles. There's no other use that you would have for a set of skis other than skiing. So those are going to show up there. When we
Okay.
have things that are more general purpose outdoor recreation, we have those in the other outdoor recreation. Let me go back to where I was. This is again, this is a just a down. This is a spreadsheet that I downloaded the data we were talking about earlier from our website onto, and I created a growth percentage change column. But we have this multi-use apparel and accessories conventional, and then we have this multi-use apparel and accessories other. So we took all of the clothing and gear that we knew could be used when you went fishing or when you went skiing or when you went snowmobiling. We didn't know what you're using it for, but we know it's outdoor related. We put it into this multi-use apparel and accessories category, and for the most part, that's going to be the profit to the retailer for selling it to you, since most of those products are made abroad. So that value is only going to reflect the markup on that product, and that's going to be the sunglasses and the bug spray and the outdoor boots and your winter coat.
And Stash, is there a way, on this same topic, is there a way, or or does the data reflect the percentage of employment related to stores that, the outdoor stores that sell those types of supplies? Is there a way to isolate that information, the percentage of employment, at outdoor retailers essentially, that supply such things?
Yes, we did. When we're calculating these numbers, we are sort of taking percentages of employees. So if you're a hotel, or if you're a department store, or I'm trying to think of a good example. If you're um, well, at least around here, the Home Depot, the hardware store, sells all sorts of hardware and tools, but they'll also, when wintertime comes around, sell some gloves and scarves and what do you call it, hand warmers, things that you could use outdoors, and flashlights. So when we're taking the percentage of those sorts of outdoor applicable items, and saying that 1% of their sales are outdoor related things, we're also going to be taking 1% of their employees. We're not taking all of their employees. We're saying that, well, we think that you need a proportional amount of employees um, to handle the outdoor related sales. So those are already kind of uh, incorporated in that piece of employment that's related to outdoor recreation is reflected in our numbers. Not all not all employees in a business.
All right. Well, that covers the questions we got. Can you put the last slide up again so people can see
Yep.
how to get in touch with you if they have more specific questions? And thanks for the tour around the website and for helping us understand the data. And I think
I
it's
wanted
pretty encouraging.
I wanted to pull up one sort of little infographic that we had that I thought really does help illustrate um, how we measured the activities, or when we're moving from activities to industries. And so we had this little infographic that our publications people put together, when it said, well, if you have this, we have an industry that's called boat manufacturing, it's durable good manufacturing. That's really only the piece that's the production of boats. But when you're looking at the activity boating, it has all of these other things that you need to purchase. Once you purchase your first boat, you're going to need to take lessons and purchase marina storage services, and you're going to have an insurance policy, and you might buy a motor, and you're going to pay the dealer. The dealer has their profit from the sale of the boat, and then you're going to be buying sunglasses and a Garmin GPS system. So all of these things that you need to buy that go with your boat, produced by many different industries, are all gathered together in those activities that we call boating or fishing or snow activities. So if you're thinking snow machining, change that picture of the boat to a snow machine, and you're still going to have the lessons and the maintenance of the motor and the insurance policy and all those other things that you need. And with that, I will go back to the slide deck, and you should see um, ending too soon. Um, there we go.
Yeah, no, I think that last boating example was a great one for people to help understand that boating encompasses all. When you see that figure on the BEA data, it includes all of those things.
Yeah, the activities are our sort of like a sort of writ large, all the stuff you need to participate in your activity. So for when you think activity, think all the stuff I need to go out and do something.
Mhm.
Um, the industry side is much more sort of narrowly focused, manufacturing or marina services that are the just the business focus.
All right. Well, thanks again, Stash. It's always a pleasure to see you and work with you and get this data that we can all use for various purposes and educating folks about why it's good to invest in the outdoor recreation economy. So thanks again, and thanks to everyone who participated. Our last Lunch and Learn will be on December 7th, and we're going to teach you all how to use the CAPSA system to get those projects considered by your state legislators in the state budget. And that's on December 7th. Until then, happy Turkey Day. Get outside and play. And thanks again.
Thank you very much, all.
Bye.